Hello, I'm Eric Snodgrass, and thank you for watching this Thursday night, March 30th In-Depth Ag Forecast brought to you by Nutrien Ag Solutions. Our first animation kind of sets us up for the next two systems that are going to be causing quite a bit of problems across the United States. The animation is set for midday Friday. And so the system that you see spinning here is the one that dropped up to 4 feet of snow in parts of the Sierra Nevada. And as it's ejected here on Thursday and it's making its way across the open plains toward the Midwest, it is being fed by a high-pressure cell that's just off of the East Coast. That's the one that's kind of pumping the moisture into it from this direction. And we do have a high-pressure cell to the north that's helping to keep the colder air on the backside. The synoptic scale winds with this system, though, we're going to be seeing widespread 30 to 50 mile-an-hour winds, with some places seeing even higher than that. And then this is going to be followed by a second system, which is here, which instead of coming like the first one, which was way down here into Southern California, will be moving through the Pacific Northwest this weekend, and by early next week, ejecting out into the plains. So this is our near-term setup, and one of the big questions we're going to try to address here is, are we looking at this for an extended time period, this very active, severe weather season? Is it going to continue like this, or are we going to see things start to back off a little bit? Because as it stands, the all hazards weather map here at 5 o'clock in the evening on Thursday is quite a mess. This is all wind related here and over here in the Appalachian Mountains. And what we're looking at here is red flag warning. So this is a risk for fire, but also blowing dust and sand and just very strong winds out ahead of this. You go to the north, and we've got a winter storm watch with now a new blizzard warning that's been issued for parts of South Dakota, and it's surrounded by winter storm watch. And we still have more of this system still sitting back here over parts of Idaho and Montana and Wyoming. Now, the winter storm watch has been issued for the Cascades. Is for the second system, the one that's coming in following this over the weekend. And the unfortunate thing about that system is it sets up, again, a severe weather risk in this area, which is currently where we're going to be watching, and then also the risk for even more snow here. And some of the snowfall totals are getting to be quite extreme in the forecast. We need to have a look at those. Let's start off on the wind side of this first. This is from today's, in fact, we should have the 18Z, and there it goes. This is today's forecast of maximum accumulated wind gusts. And the 18Z NAM is actually high enough resolution to capture some thunderstorm level winds, and that's what you see right in through here. But overall, just kind of look at this entire area. Look over here in the color bar. This is that 30 to 50 mile an hour synoptic scale wind pattern we're going to see throughout this entire duration of this storm system. Extremely windy, even outside of the thunderstorms. And then behind it, we have the second system coming in. Now, I'm recording this on Thursday night, so we're still looking at a day 2 SPC outlook. But the Storm Prediction Center has maintained a quite large region of enhanced risk, and then these two different areas for moderate risk. And what we're actually seeing in these two different areas is the way that fronts are interacting to increase the trigger, the lifting mechanism, and how the upper level wind shear is going to set up over these two regions, which is why we've seen an increased threat for tornadic activity in these two spots. Now, between now and the next time you consume a weather forecast, if you're in this area and you're watching this, I'm going to recommend that you just go to the Storm Prediction Center. Many of you watching know of this site, but for those of you that don't, it's just spc.noaa.gov. And when you get here, there's a lot of different things to interact with, but why don't we just do this for this go around? Go to Convective Outlooks, click on that button right there, and then you can go to the day 1 or all the way out to day 8 down here. But I want you to click, if you're watching this on Friday, you're going to click day 1, but if you're catching this on Thursday night, click on day 2. This is the outlook for Friday. So I just map that. That's all that this is. I just take the data from NOAA and make my own map out of it. But I want to show you that they've now gone up to a 15% hatched in 2 different areas. And the hatching means that there is a 10% or greater probability of a tornado ranked between EF2 and EF5 within 25 miles of any given point. And this is a week following the incredible tornado disaster we saw go through parts of Mississippi, and then the severe weather that followed it. So very stressful day tomorrow. In addition to the tornado threat, we do have a high wind threat, again, right up here in what we call the triple point of this system in eastern Iowa, northwestern Illinois, and there's also significant hail threat in that region as well. So we have just numerous things to be on the lookout for here. while I do have a lot of training in severe weather, I spend most of my time researching and trying to understand longer-term patterns. I have a couple of great colleagues, Matt Reardon and Andrew Pritchard, who I would consider experts in this particular area, and we spend a lot of the day talking through this. But to keep this away from being an extremely long video, I just want to tell you about something. I'm just keeping an eye in this area. That's it's not to say that there isn't going to be this similar scenario happening down here with the tornado threat, but what we're watching in this area, I'm going to take you to a forecast sounding for one of my favorite websites, pivotalweather.com. It's a great one. And what I've done is I've gone into the pre-storm environment in northwestern Illinois, and we're looking at a forecast sounding. So this is what would be traced out on this diagram should we launch a balloon right before the storms get there. So what I'm looking for here, if you notice this white dashed line and the red line, so this is the environmental temperature. This is the temperature of air that will be thrust into the lower and upper atmosphere by the surface front. We call it a parcel. What we try to do is we measure the area between these two lines to give us an estimate on total potential energy in the atmosphere. And so some of the CAPE values out of this are in the 1,500 to almost 2,500 joules per kilogram range. We then look at the surface temperatures. We look for any capping inversions, and I don't see one here. And then finally, we look at the wind shear, so the change of wind speed and direction with height. And there's a lot of different ways you can look at this, but we can look at it here with the individual wind barbs. So just as an example, this one right here is a 35 knot wind out of the south-southwest, and this one up here is 115 knots out of the southwest. So there's change in direction. But the hodograph also tells us a lot. And anytime you see a hodograph, which is what this diagram is, that kind of starts like this, curls around, and then runs off the page, that is the style of hodograph that is most commonly associated with rotating storms. And so the risk of some of these being supercells tomorrow is high. What we think will happen is shown here pretty well on the high-resolution rapid refresh model. So this is one of our high-res models. It's going to produce a forecast for every hour. And what we're going to look at here is its simulated radar reflectivity field. Now, where we are in time, this is 5 a.m. tomorrow morning. So this is a broad shield of rain, maybe some embedded thunderstorms in this. This is not the main event. The main event is what follows it. This is through tomorrow morning on Friday. We're now getting to about 2 o'clock in the afternoon. And this is when the low has set itself up over Iowa. And by 4 o'clock, depending on how much sunshine gets in here, we're going to watch the lower levels of the atmosphere heat up and quickly destabilize. So there's actually 3 separate frontal boundaries with this, kind of feeding into this low. And we have one to the south, which is increasing the risk in Arkansas, western Tennessee, Kentucky, the Boot Hill, Missouri, southern Illinois. A second that's coming right through Illinois. And then the third, which is up near what we call the triple point of this cyclone. So then you see by 6 o'clock, possibly 2 rounds of storms. This one, followed by the main frontal boundary that comes through behind it, and that sweeps through bringing another round of storms. So this is the time frame, 4 o'clock till almost 10 o'clock, that we're going to watch from Iowa through Illinois, Indiana, and Ohio, and then down south here, Kentucky, Tennessee, coming out of Arkansas and Missouri. On the backside, all of this is actually going to be snow, and this is the next system that follows. So let's go over, look at the high-res NAM to get an idea on that. I'm going to start this off about 10 o'clock tonight when this system's going. We do have the risk of some mixed precipitation here. That's the first round of rain that moves through, again, by 4 o'clock on Friday morning. Then the system really invigorates, and this is by 6 p.m. And you can see the high-res NAM giving us a very similar outlook. Do you notice the kind of 3 different fronts? There's 1, there's 2, and then this one's already been absorbed, almost occluded there. And it's going to be along each of these boundaries that we're going to watch for the storms to initiate. So just want to give you the timing again. 4 o'clock, 5, 6, 7, 8 p.m., then getting here to midnight, and then pressing through Ohio in the overnight hours with the tail end of this front coming through Kentucky, Tennessee, down into Mississippi. Now, could the timing change? Absolutely. Depending on how we see these initial storms going up, this all could change. But now you understand why the Storm Prediction Centers identified such a large area of having this severe risk. Why not over into Ohio? Well, the storm will lose some of that energy as it goes into the overnight hours, which is why we don't see this extended farther in that direction. On the backside, we've got snow coming through Minnesota, Wisconsin, even tucking around into Iowa, where we do expect some very heavy snow. And don't forget, I didn't mean to ignore this, but look at Nebraska, South Dakota. There's the potential for some very heavy snow out of this before the system even breaks out into the severe weather here. So very dynamic system that pulls into New England, a lot of warm air out ahead of it, which is why we don't see snow here, but snow on the backside stretching from parts of Quebec and Ontario through the Great Lakes into Wisconsin and Illinois. All right, that is just the first one, and it's out Sunday. High pressure moves in behind it. We're going to flip over to a multi-model analysis, and I want to show you something. As of late, it's been pretty impressive to see the models gaining some skill, and it's also important to see that the GFS at times has been matching the European's performance. And just to show you what that looks like, got the GFS on the left and the European on the right. Can you just blur your eyes and watch this with me? What you're going to see is both models through the next 10 days are attempting to initiate the same suite of storm systems. Do you notice that? So a lot of agreement. So we've already seen through early Sunday morning, right about here. There's the high pressure that moves in. System number 2 is hitting the Cascades. Now I'm keeping an eye on the European solution for this, but as it pushes here, it's going to put down more snow in the Cascades, the Central Rockies, Nevada, the Sierra Nevada mountains, storms down in Louisiana as this happens. And then on Monday afternoon and evening, this low will eject out into the Colorado Rockies. You can see the snow here in Wyoming, getting back into Utah, but the low is right here at this time. And it's going to come out and go straight into Kansas, a little bit farther to the south than the current low, which is bringing even more snow, stretching from Minnesota, North and South Dakota, and into Nebraska. And this is the one that might put down a tremendous amount of snow. It is also going to increase the threat of severe weather all throughout this region next Tuesday night. It is in both models. I know you're looking at that going, but this model's not designed to show you convection, so we have to look at the other ingredients. There is three very sharp fronts with this. It's actually in both models that they're anticipating occurring here. And this is really going to be increasing the severe weather threat across a broad area in through here. Now that system starts to exit over the Great Lakes, and again, very warm air pulls more rain into New England. So the snow is here, almost in a very similar place as the previous system. This front clears the Carolinas, which I do need to see more moisture getting into there. And then we notice that getting out there to Friday the 7th, we see another potential large system kind of showing up here. Now, the timing of that second system, Tuesday the 4th, for a lot of us in meteorology, that reminds us of kind of an important event. I'll just show you this real quick. Go back to the Storm Prediction Center site. Let's just go up to the main site here, SPC. You click on Storm Reports, and you get all the recent storm reports. But what a lot of us will remember April the 4th for was what it did in 2011. April 4th, 2011. That is actually the record holder for the most reports to the Storm Prediction Center in a single day. Now, it wasn't where we're going to watch the severe weather this April 4th, but it was over the southeast. That's it. That's the busiest day. Following that, this system, remember, there is another one, and we need to keep an eye out for when that one could possibly be ejecting in the southern plains as well. Now, before we get there, I just want to make another point here about this system on April the 4th. This is the current day 6 outlook from the Storm Prediction Center on where they've kind of honed in on an area for having severe weather. They've kind of got Arkansas and Missouri, southern Missouri, kind of bullseyed out of this one, which means we're going to start immediately talking after the system goes through tomorrow about the next one on Tuesday. There's a lot of snow with this, and I want to show you the multi-model analysis. This is system number 1. So there is the potential in South Dakota, pockets of Minnesota, but Wisconsin, the UP, Ontario, that we could be having a few places picking up a foot of snow. The second system comes in and hits the Cascades right there. And then as it ejects out of Colorado into Kansas, it puts down its heavy snow band right through here. And now we're talking about adding snow from Wyoming to parts of northern Nebraska, South Dakota, Minnesota, and more into Wisconsin. And there's already a tremendous amount of snow to the north of it. And there's model agreement. That's the GFS, 7-day outlook. This is the European. Some of the forecast models, if you look at the color bar, I'm just going to give you some raw numbers here, are putting down well over 2 feet of snow, approaching 3 feet of snow in this area. Now, it's a single model run. We're going to look at the ensemble analysis in a moment, but the potential's there. Same thing for the Cascades, and they need this snow. So what do the ensembles say? Well, this is the probability of getting 3 inches. I think we understand the high probability in that corridor. This is 6 inches, a 90% or better chance. This is 12 inches. This is a 60 to 80% chance. This is 18 inches. Now we're focusing on the Cascades, pockets of the Northern Rockies, but there's a 50% chance in this corridor and through here, right here, here, and here, of getting at least 18 inches of snow. And there's 24 and 36. So now we're down to this area, but we cannot rule this out as of yet. And our bigger problem is that this is what our snow water equivalent map looks like right now. And the area I just showed you that's going to add all the snow is primarily this corridor. And that is an area that we already are snow free, but if we add more to this region, it's just going to continue to increase our spring flood threat going forward. And as I've been doing, just to make a point, this was what things looked like a year ago. So this is the current data, if I can get that lined up for you, and this is last year. That's a remarkable difference. This is just the snowy side of this. On the heavy precipitation side, probability of getting an inch, probability of getting 2 inches, probability of getting 4 inches of rain in the next 10 days. So there's up to 3 systems that could hit this particular area. Now, on the temperature side of this, because of all that snow, you're going to see that much of the northern plains and upper Midwest maintain their colder bias. Same thing for the west. The other side of this is we just keep seeing troughs here with ridging happening in this area. So this gets us out there through the 4th through the 9th of April. We can keep playing this forward. And just like we talked about in the last couple of morning videos, we start to see some sense of a pattern shift mid-month. But I'm very concerned that it might not be until late April, especially here, that we get a lot of the snow that's in those areas truly melting. We see a snow feedback issue in the model, but this is going to be just something to be very aware of, that this is likely going to cause some major problems with planting. The colder air that you see over parts of the rest of the country for getting up to middle of April, this has been a pretty robust signal. There are still some signs that this may begin to break after mid-April, but we have a lot to be watching for. To get this all to break, you got to plant a big ridge here. I should have drawn that circle this way. Ridges flow in this direction. A big ridge right there. And what we see as we kind of play this forward is that the pattern isn't really showing that. That's the big system on the 4th. There's still a trough here, weak ridging over the Gulf. But the pattern begins to loosen up a bit because of this trough. So the flow goes around and over. But that means the colder air has to get displaced east before it goes anywhere else. So the West Coast starts to see a mild trend toward the middle of the month if this doesn't return. This was a signal I did not want to see at the end of the forecast. It's one where you just keep that shape flow in the atmosphere. And this is what we've been seeing. Troughs coming into the west, running over ridges that open up the Gulf of Mexico in spring, which means I'm still very much concerned across this whole area for the risk of a lot of severe weather in the month of April for that part of the United States. Precipitation side of things. The full week 2 forecast is drier in the west as the flow stops with such intensely deep troughs, but we still keep this whole region quite wet as the jet stream out there to, when you look out this far, just kind of favors this look to it. All right. Okay, let's talk about other models. This is the GFS ensemble showing you the forecast for precipitation for week 2. Looks very much like the European. And the CPC has updated their week 2. You can see that they've got wetter conditions here, drier to the west. But it's the movement of this colder air that we're going to have to watch going past middle of the month. So this is April 7th through the 14th. Okay, I front-loaded the talk today, or the video today with the near-term weather. I do now want to spend a little bit more time talking about the longer-term weather. This is a bit of a confusing signal to me, all right? The MJO popping out into phase 6, phase 7. We thought that it might do that. But if you look at this diagram, we would have to really just see a continuation of the MJO pattern sweeping over in this direction, which I think it can do. But if it does that, the bad news with this pattern is this is what the MJO, when there is no El Nino or La Nina, does in MJO phase 7. We reinforce some ridging here. The flow tends to do a lot of this, and the whole pattern stays very active. That's why I'm convinced that through April we're going to see a lot of severe weather in this area. In fact, I should expand that to include more of the Midwest. And what I don't like about sending deeper troughs into the west is it stays cold in the west. So that warm-up I just showed you might be brief. And it also means that we continue to see the risk for more snow in this area. Nobody wants to hear that. But that's what one possible teleconnection could be. The latest European model outlook for mid-May, try that again, mid-April to mid-May, the 15th to the 15th, keeps this corridor wet, keeps it dry where we have drought, but does finally calm down the west coast a bit. On the temperature side of it, the model is very much staying with the cooler conditions that it has been seeing and forecasting. Now, I don't know that it will do this. I actually think the pattern will favor more warmer conditions by the 3rd and 4th week of April, getting all throughout this area. We're going to have a snow feedback issue here. I think the whole of the west coast will start to warm up, though, soon as well. So those are my alterations on this, or alterations, excuse me. And tomorrow's CPC update should help us understand that. But there is some support from the CFSV2 model, CFSV2, excuse me. So the next 2 weeks, we see that same pattern we've been seeing. That's temperatures. And then we see the week 3, week 4. That's week 3. That's the 13th through the 19th of April. And that's the 20th through the 26th. Anytime you see cold here and warm there, the jet stream rips between it, and that's the risk for the severe weather to continue. So what does all of this kind of distill down to? Because if we come back to this graphic and just say, all right, show me that precip again. There's just a lot of wet weather in this area. And drier here. And that's kind of what we've seen, right? Very wet conditions coming into the west, and then wet all in through there. We've been drier here, and drier in through this pocket. And this is just the month-to-date total precipitation ranks by climate district. This is the latest drought monitor. Now, we did lose 36% of the area in the country that was in drought in fall that's no longer in drought. But it has firmly stayed anchored in the Central Plains, Southern Plains, Florida, and it's rebuilding in parts of coastal North Carolina and Virginia. From here, we just want to know, is there any sign that some of that could get eaten away? And the big things I'm watching again, we are watching this whole area transition to El Nino over the next 4 to 6 months. And that's all going to happen because of a change in the atmospheric pattern. If that same change in the atmospheric flow can get rid of this cold water here, then we will see the drought in the plains start to improve as we go forward. But maybe not until we get into May or even June. I don't think April's the month. But we need to see this warm water begin to encroach in on this area to cure that drought. The problem is if that occurs, we run the risk of redeveloping drought up the west coast come summer. So plenty of things to keep an eye on here. And I look forward to about, 7 days from now, we'll have brand new long-range update from the European to kind of add into the mix. All right, real quick about South America. This is what their 3-month drought indicator map looks like. And there's been major improvement right here only because of some recent rains. To show you how wet it has been, this is the last 5 days. So you look back over that time period. Well, really, excuse me, that's the 21st through the 25th. We've had record rainfall in some areas. And interestingly enough, that has changed the NDVI values. They were in mid-March the lowest that we have in the last 20 years. But with all that rain, stuff is kind of greened up. I wouldn't interpret this, though, as an improvement in the crop conditions. This is just what happens when it rains really heavily on an area that's been in drought. What I can tell you, though, is that throughout Brazil, the NDVI values are still on trend or above trend. Remember, Brazil has 2 peaks in their NDVI values, one that happens January to February, a second one that happens in the month of April. This is first crop and second crop. And right now, though, the crop that is in the ground, Safrinha crop for Brazil, looks fantastic based on recent precipitation, no excessive heat, and the forecast is trending better. We continue to see each new model run backing away from the risk of drier weather here. And where the drier conditions are, they're coming down into the Paraná River Basin, southern Brazil, Uruguay, and we're starting to see a drier trend in parts of Argentina showing up again. So I don't think this is going to have any negative impact on Brazil's Safrinha corn. I think it'll be a relatively large crop, a fairly large crop because of the favorable weather conditions. But next year could be an entirely different story for Brazil, simply due to the change we're going to see in the pattern with El Nino emerging. All right, be very weather aware tomorrow if you are in this region, okay? I just want to make sure that you have access to weather information, be it text alerts from the National Weather Service, be it your own weather radio. Just stay aware of what's going on here. I will talk to you soon. Thanks.